look at those, and if we could have a motion to leave, I guess, to approve the agenda as is what we need.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, item 4, approval of the August 19th minutes. Take a look at those, if we have a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Okay, item 5, recommendation on the preliminary plat for Creekview Estates. You have the engineer speak to that.
Hope you guys don't mind, I'm going to turn this because I'm sure the audience wants to see the concept, which hasn't changed any from when I presented it for rezoning. Can you guys see that all right? First, Josh Trickstead, Civil Design Advantage, 3405 Southeast Crossroads Drive, Grimes, Iowa. On behalf of North Polk Development, we're requesting recommended approval of the Creekview Estates preliminary plat. The parcel is located basically at the southwest corner of Hug and 3rd Street and contains approximately 32 acres of undeveloped ground. Has a couple residents there, or old farmsteads that will be torn down. The rest of it is a farm field. What we're proposing is single family per the rezoning that we went through in August. And that will be, I believe, 86 lots. And then there will be a few outlots. One of the main outlots will be for stormwater management facilities. As for street connections, we're connecting to the existing Creekview Drive off of Wolf Creek Estates. We're also, Wolf Creek Drive, I apologize, coming off of Wolf Creek. And then also extending Creekview Drive to 3rd Street. And then also West Trace Place onto Hug. As for utilities, sanitary sewer and water main connection is from Wolf Creek. We are extending water along Hug Avenue to loop the city system. Other than that, I believe we've addressed the last of Snyder's comments that showed up in the staff report that you guys received. Other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
I have one question about the names of the streets.
Mm-hmm.
You have a West Trace Drive, and then you have another West Trace Drive now. It doesn't connect.
We call this West Trace Place.
Right. It's so small I can't read it.
And that's just to help with usually if it did connect, that's the reason we kind of stuck with that same naming configuration.
That answers my question. I wasn't looking at it close enough, so that's good.
I had a question. We talked briefly before the meeting about the grading would pretty much be all done at one time. There's 2 phases, correct?
Correct. And I guess I should illustrate that the first phase would actually be the southwest corner, and that's just mainly due to utility connection plus this other connection, and the pond need to be constructed, 1 for stormwater management facilities and 2 for borrow. The other area of grading will probably actually be up in the northeast corner, just because if you recall that site, that knob kind of extends down from the intersection, and the rest of the site actually sits in a hole. So I would say a majority of the site will be mass graded. However, probably I'd say the southeast corner, that little cul-de-sac, will likely be grading as material is available to the basically the site is in a net borrow, so they'll have to be looking for other sources of dirt.
Just a follow-up to that, is it on the tree notes here, is it possible to get the trees along 3rd in the grading phase, or is that too much in the weeds at this point? Or does it have to be?
It would probably be in the weeds just because of this area.
Yeah. Okay.
That's not to say that this couldn't be put in. The other problems with those trees, well, I guess due to those grades, most of those PVs, I think we were specifying in the front of the yard just because of how 3rd Street and Hug will sit up in the air a little bit. And to elaborate on that, we did try to save as many trees as we could. Right? We look at it, the trees are an asset, so we prefer to keep them all. It's just, unfortunately, the site, like I said, sits kind of in a hole, so there's a lot of areas where we can't save the trees. unfortunately.
I had one other question and then I'll be quiet. I noticed there were 3 mailboxes on that layout.
We have not sent this off to the U.S. Post Office to get confirmed locations of the mailbox pads, and that's usually an ongoing comment. We usually get that locked down before
Final.
construction drawings, which would be before final plat.
Okay.
But anymore, that's usually the regional office or the post office kind of oversees that, not even local post office. So those will be locked down, and of course, more and more they try making those more consolidated just so the carriers have less places to stop.
Yeah, because that's going to be like 30 mail stops.
Actually,
that was what I was leading up to, is traffic flow around those.
Yep. And we try to keep those at least a lot or two away from the intersection with the thought of you don't want to have that intersection, I guess.
Sure. Okay.
And then, those mailbox pads, also the newer ones, you're going to see a lot more what they request is a parcel box, and that's just more due to the online shopping. That's just how the post office dictates it to us and the developer.
Commission questions?
I had a question. There's a paragraph here talking about off-site grading. Where is that? Where will that be?
Show that really quick, actually. There's an existing, along Wolf Creek, there's an existing drainage easement. That's actually, over here. The existing drainage easement is defined. That existing easement actually terminates right here and doesn't extend all the way to 3rd Street. And basically it'll be a 15-foot drainage easement that'll go in there. And we'll work with that adjacent developer. That's the undeveloped portion on Wolf Creek. But I think there was always planned like a rear yard swale to basically connect to this existing swale behind the homes that are.
Okay, so that's not on this, but you got to get that worked out.
Yep.
Jason,
And we've already discussed that with Snyder Associates. No work will be taking place on site until documentation is provided that shows that permission.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I have the same concerns tonight that I had when we had the result of this, and you came forward with the proposed plan, I guess, and that is what eventually happens to West Trace Drive in Creek. The way this is showing, that would stay a public street terminating without a cul-de-sac bulb, which in the 16 years I've been on the commission, that'll be the first time we will have ever had a street terminate square without a cul-de-sac bulb as its permanent way that it's going to be in our city forever. When the city took possession of that street back, probably 15 years ago or 16 years ago, it was done with a plan for that to move forward. And that is how we recommended it to council, how the council accepted that proposal, and then they accepted the actual street based on that assumption. Now, if that assumption is going to change, we need to come up with a long-term solution that's going to comply with our ordinances. As I look at it, West Trace could go through. There's nothing really preventing that. I think there's some folks here in the audience who would have some input on that and probably would speak to their desire to not have it go through. Another option would be to, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
You won't.
okay. Could have a cul-de-sac bulb put on West Trace Drive within the Creek development. That was approved assuming that you were going to accept it there. So as I would look at that, that would be partially your responsibility to work with them on that if that's to remain a public street. Or thirdly, that West Trace Drive, which is, I'm not sure how long that is, maybe 150 feet or so, could be deeded from the city to the Wolf Creek Association and turned into a private drive as many of the other stub drives are within the Wolf Creek development. That way, the city would not be responsible for that stub creek drive. But I can't get to a yes with, on your proposal, without understanding what is the permanent, resolution for this issue that we have.
I guess my only response to that is, unfortunately, I don't represent Wolf Creek Town Homeowners Association, and it's probably mainly their input that's going to be on that, other than Snyder might have some input also.
And we had something similar happen not that long ago, but in the property up where Hy-Vee is going to be going, and we had a stub street in Pine Ridge. And essentially, we didn't get to yes until we knew that the owners of those properties on either side of that street were going to assume and take responsibility for that street. Essentially, it was only a half block long. They split it in the middle and deeded it to the property owners on each side. And so that was a resolution of that situation there. We had something similar happen also in Deer Haven. And there the developer put the streets through. They were proposing in the older section of town that we just end the streets, and they got more lots out of their development by having a long continuous street. And we ended up having them put the streets through. There's like I said, there's, as I look at it, 3 different ways to look at it. But I can't get to, like I said, I can't get to a yes vote without a contingency on the yes vote or on the motion saying that has to be resolved before I'd be comfortable with it. You know, I just don't see that we and our insurers and can have a street ending like that as our permanent solution for our transportation system.
The only thing I can add to that is, I understand that concern. It was expressed at council too, and at P&Z last time we went through rezoning. It was actually expressed at council, but council actually went to the direction of telling us these residents did not want it to go through and to proceed with the layout design as we had shown. Because there was a direct question where, which way do you want us to go? And they said, if the existing residents want to not have that as a through street, I think one of the concerns was traffic, and 2 was mainly the trees. And I could show you that. Basically, saving approximately like 30 to 40 feet of tree buffer through here, through those rear of those lots. So there would always be a screening at the end of that street. I guess that's why we proceeded with this, was council even gave that indication that we want to go this direction with that cul-de-sac.
And if we go with the cul-de-sac, then that takes number 1 of those 3 options off the list. You still have the option of putting a cul-de-sac bulb on that, keeping it as a public street, or having it go into private ownership.
I wanted to share one thing we did at staff. Talked to Mike Schulte, Public Works Director, Trace Kendig, the police officer, and Jim. Thank you. Sorry, Steve, the fire chief, and they all did not have a problem with this short stub street in this unique location remaining as it is. They said they've been maintaining and operating it for years, so they did not have a real heartburn, I guess if you will, about the street staying as it is. And we've had that discussion, I believe it was before it even went to council, because after the P&Z meeting, we thought, that it would come up at council. So,
and we have similar stub streets within the Wolf Creek development as well.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of who owns those streets and that.
Right.
So, I mean, you wouldn't know, but when I look in here at that area, there's Chinook Way, White Trail Way, Coyote Way, and so on. Are
Those are all private.
Those are all
Anytime there's a street and it has
private.
way as the extension, it's a private street.
So that's the only little section there that's public in that development.
That has a Stub Drive.
Wolf
And,
Creek Drive is also public.
So,
In the east-west one is public as well, isn't that? That might be
Vista
like,
Lake,
just
is that what it's
yeah.
If I recall, and that's just for me looking at the adjacent development. as we're
And
looking at
Wolf
this.
Creek Drive is, I guess, also a public street, currently a stub street, but it will be extended. So that leaves the ones that we're proposing be a public street without any cul-de-sac bulb on the end as its permanent solution.
Fire department's okay with it because of the,
Yeah, they just,
Fire
they
hydrant
didn't,
location.
they probably wouldn't pull down that direction anyway. They didn't seem to feel that there was any issue with serving it for fire protection purposes. Public Works didn't have a real concern about it in terms of snow removal. Again, because it's a real short, it's short. If it was longer, you know, and again, they looked at it specifically because of the direction that council was, heading.
commission comments on that. Is there anybody from the Wolf Creek Association that would like to speak to that?
I would like to ask a different question. My name's Al Burrows, and I live in the Wolf Creek County. And this, you have been discussing this probably for a while, so I'm new to this. But what about like water runoff? Given that it's all pretty much downhill out here, you're going to level out some of that, but there'll be new roads, there'll be a lot more water runoff. Where is that going?
Would you like me to just go ahead and address that?
Absolutely, yeah.
So the majority of the site will actually be funneled to this permanent wet pond, if you can see this. And then right now, all the water is kind of actually filling in here and going along that channel that runs on the north side of the creek. In essence, what we're going to do is actually contain or collect and manage that and release at a much slower rate. We're actually providing detention similar to like a commercial site. So we're actually throttling that water back down to a 5-year existing release versus the 100-year existing that code actually allows. And that's just mainly because we have the pond to do it, so why not? But keep in mind that that will still go there. Now and that should collect, I guess, the majority of this runoff. All the public streets will go to there. Now the only thing I would add, and sorry, I'm just going to look at it from this big viewpoint. This area already sheet flows to there, so there'll still be a swale, sheet flows down to here. There'll still be a swale along this undeveloped outlot in Wolf Creek. That'll still collect it, and then we'll install this culvert right at the end of Wolf Creek Drive, and that will discharge basically through the swale. So we're not really changing any drainage patterns anyway because this is still swale. What the proposed development is actually going to do is manage more of that runoff to be less peak runoff coming down this channel.
And I guess the reason I'm asking is because you'll have less land to soak up that water. So there'll be more water.
There'll be more volume, but we'll release at a slower rate than what you would see today.
Yeah, and the other thing was, so the only street right now that's planning to go through is Wolf Drive.
Correct. And that alludes to our conversation we had on the west trace and the attempt to not disturb this existing channel, those trees to that.
And then on that section, the public roads would be the rest of West Trace going north, where you're going to put in a West Trace there.
West Trace Place, yep.
Right? And then Wolf Creek does not go all the way to the Hugget.
No, there'll be a T intersection here, and then it'll actually be a little, what we call a knuckle, cul-de-sac. That'll turn here. The main reason that Wolf Creek Drive can't go to here is just due to the elevation difference on Hug Drive, even 3rd Street. We don't want to push too many intersections close to the Hug and 3rd, and 2, the elevation of that intersection sits approximately think it was almost 50 feet higher than Wolf Creek Drive there.
And all those are city streets, no private?
Correct.
See, I think that's good that we only have one public going through, because we do have a number of private streets. And rather than have a whole lot of residents driving through our ways that we're responsible for, it's better if they're driving through a public street.
Are they talking? Just for the minutes, I think you ought to clarify, but everybody keeps talking about Wolf Creek Drive. It's Wolf Creek Street. Right. Okay, thanks.
I thought it was Wolf.
Yeah, we have it as Wolf Creek Drive.
Says,
Sorry, that was
says street on your,
that was one of the comments, one of the 5 comments that Snyder had today that we did address. It is Wolf Creek
I thought it
Drive.
was drive too, I'm like, so you
Yeah,
changed
it's
it.
drive, and so it's a continuous.
So it's
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
just
it's
so
not
there's
switching.
confusion that
It's
you
not
brought-
straight.
No,
Right.
Correct.
Even though it says street.
On the new and improved version, it says drive.
Yep.
That corrects, there's 5
Place.
there's 5 comments that were outstanding when it came out in the packets. It revised
Okay.
it today.
Thanks.
The other thing just to mention, that's on a totally separate subject, but the developer, at staff's request, is proposing to fulfill their parkland dedication by increasing the size of the required 4-foot sidewalk along North Third to a 10-foot wide trail that could eventually become part of the connector system or whatever, but, and eventual trail connections, but that's at staff's request.
No.
And looking at the cost opinion, it's very close. We will balance it out when we get actual costs.
And that's along where now, can you,
That's along Third.
along,
Yeah. If you see this dark shaded,
All right.
and that was another comment that was one of the 5 comments that were addressed. I believe there was another question you guys had out here.
Okay.
Brian Blaylock, I live in Wolf Creek subdivision at my intentional way. And I just have a question as to what was the main reasoning to put Wolf Creek Drive as a through street into the new neighborhood? What's the benefit, or why do we need a street to go through both subdivisions at all? Just leave it as it is. That's my main concern, due to traffic reasons and such. So,
I guess I could.
Do you guys want me to take that? Or,
All right, well, I can
or-
say one of the reasons is in terms of being compliant with your subdivision fence, so that you don't have any blocks that are greater than 1320. Also, Wolf Creek Drive, like West Trace Drive, was always intended to be a through street. It was constructed in multiple phases to actually get it up there. It was stopped short, about 30 feet short of the property line, in order to allow for a culvert that Josh had talked about from the east there. So it was stopped short. That was always the intention that one would go through. Comp plan does call for connectivity between neighborhoods. And while we can see with the shading of the trees and the odd alignment of West Trace Drive, which makes it very difficult to extend because of the angle that it's in at, Wolf Creek Drive, from a grade standpoint and every other standpoint, there wasn't any reason to certainly cut that one off. So.
Yes.
Charlotte Loader, 913 West Trace, as if you all didn't know that. Anyhow, my question to Ron, even though I know a lot of these things that you're talking about, what is the advantage to taking West Trace and putting this cul-de-sac bowl there?
It makes it compliant with our city,
Okay.
and our city ordinance with regards to that is really based on state and federal standards, which I'm guessing probably our insurance carrier would prefer that we comply with as well.
Well, since I'm the house that it ends at, I am totally against this, which you all already know all that. And I just hope that you can all make it, I don't know the word I want to say, a very well thought decision. and stay with the plans that the developer has.
Yes, my name's Jim Jensen, and we're at 530 Northern Trace Court. And I think when we look at the extension on West Trace where Charlotte lives, and you've talked about the other green ways, they're part of the properties on that street. I think you have 4 people on that street, Charlotte?
What, at the end?
Yeah. But I think any of you don't want to take that responsibility instead of seeing that street through. I even a cul-de-sac. I mean, the way it is right now, we have neighborhoods. I mean, we've been there since 2011, and when we moved in on Northern Trace, we were looking at fields across the street, and now it's all full of houses and everything. And sure, we knew that was going to happen, but still, we also knew it was going to stay a neighborhood instead of expanding up, a half mile of the next road. So that's kind of my.
I'm Betty Sicking, and I live at 904 West Trace. I'm in the 2 houses that are part of that. I really appreciate the trees and the fact there is the gully there, and it's all natural. And it seems to me like that's a perfect place to stop. Because it's going to cost, if you're going to extend it, even to make the bulb, whatever you call it, it's going to be pricey because that's a fairly deep gorge, and it just seems like it's a natural place to stop.
So just a question for kind of you guys collectively then. You have stub streets currently that are association maintained, not city maintained. So the city isn't responsible for them. Would you be willing to take over that 150 feet or 100 feet?
Ron?
And your association is clearly the one that has to say yes or no.
Let's back up, and Al, back me up if I say this wrong, okay? We are not 100% owned association. We don't have that much say because we are not totally built out 100%. So the association people you would need to talk to are Jamie Myers and Troy Strawhouser.
Straw Hecker.
Him. Unfortunately, I better not say that. I'm saying my own thoughts. Unfortunately, we don't have that much say on that side of the court.
I live in a townhome.
I know you do.
We just took ours over a year ago. I understand.
You totally get that, right?
I understand.
I would think though that we wouldn't just be talking about that end part of West Trace Drive. I would think if you're saying that you're not going to have West Trace Drive be a city street, then it would be all the way to that Northern Trace Drive from Wolf Creek.
First of all, just how I would believe it would be managed would be just that 150 feet, and that street would change its name to probably West Trace Way to be in compliance
So
with
West
our
Trace
city.
Drive would still be a city street going to that Northern Trace Court.
That's how I had envisioned how it would.
Yeah, because the one, I would imagine that Troy and Jamie would put it up, even though we don't have our board. I would imagine they would still want to put it up to the owners voting on it, because it would be the extra cost of our maintenance, our maintenance and our snow removal and so it would add costs to the association. So I'm not quite sure. I would imagine they'd put it to a vote to the members.
And what it would get the city is having a stub street out of compliance with our code.
Right. And then I'm also not sure where the city would put the snow from West Trace Drive, because it really kind of goes to the end of that street. So I'm not sure how that would work.
Another thing I'm concerned with in this area is that I don't know how many lots we have left that need to be developed, but I would think it would be in our interest to have those taken care of. That whenever we go through to another area and encourage development on that side instead of our side, because we're not going to be under our own control until those are sold. So I don't know who's who, I just have to do it. Right now, we have no control until everything's sold. Just because of insurance reasons, if I understand.
I got a question. It's similar to my husband's. My name's Robin Blaylock, and I'm at 910 Way. I understand you addressed the issue with Wolf Creek Drive going, I assume because it's in accordance with the neighborhood rules that you have to have. I still don't understand what purpose. I know there's going to be an inflow of a lot more traffic, or I feel like there will be, if that road goes all the way through our neighborhood, and there's a lot of people that walk in our neighborhood, and we don't really have, we have sidewalks, but there's no connectivity to the downtown area to have a trail or say a sidewalk if you're going to walk downtown. I know that's the opposite direction, but I still am not clear as to why that street, or is it just because of the city guidelines or the rules that it has to go through to the other neighborhood?
The main reason is because it was planned for that.
Oh. Well, and it's part of the subdivision.
Because it's part of the, exactly. And,
So that would have.
and
that
some
is
of the national standards are, and I'll allude to this from like an emergency perspective, is if one of you guys have two access points on the 3rd Street, if one or both were ever clogged, you just want that third access. And then
again, there is a maximum block length, which is why one of them could be vacated or not put through, and yet you would still meet the subdivision regulations of 1,320 feet separation.
And then as you're concerned about traffic, keep in mind the proposed development to the north is single. We're not talking about a high density. It's going to be a single family neighborhood that's probably going to be families walking sidewalks just like your neighborhood. It's not something that's going to be, I mean, honestly, any of those residents are going to have the same feelings. They don't want a bunch of traffic going through there either. And we're also designing these streets at a consideration of being local residential streets. So they're not 31 feet wide, feeling like a thoroughfare that you can drive extra fast through. They'll be residential streets.
Any other comments?
Are they individually owned, or is it going to be an association? I mean, where ours are individually owned too, but I mean, is it going to be an association or just a neighborhood?
They'll be individually owned lots. There'll still be an association because there's still items that need to be maintained by the overall neighborhood, which is like the stormwater management facilities. I'm assuming that's similar to your guys' association. The ponds probably, and then the private. But all the streets in here are proposed to be public. So the big association items will just be that stormwater management facility.
You had made or in the packet, there was information about the grading would like to begin yet this year. Is that still current?
Yes, as soon as possible.
After the final plat, I mean, it's still.
Well,
through
usually the final plat
It'd be the preliminary plat. Your tree ordinance doesn't allow a grading permit to be issued until after the preliminary plat's been approved by city council. So they could, at that point in time, they would be proceeding somewhat at their own risk because the construction drawings probably wouldn't be approved at that point in time. So there could be a little bit of design tweaks, but they would have a general consensus certainly on the layout and general grading.
And we've already went through the process of obtaining the MPS permit and submitted a split stormwater pollution prevention plan to Snyder for their review.
Okay. I guess the follow-up to that was if we approve something subject to it being going back to the association regarding the street being going into the private, Wolf Creek, that would hold things up, correct? I mean, that's going to take, I'm assuming, a while or not.
You're asking a third party, who doesn't have any direct benefit here. I would have no idea if
Well,
they would
I
ever
would
even agree to that.
disagree with him not having direct benefit in that. Initially, this was approved to have both streets going through. He's benefiting by not having to put one street through and putting in the cul-de-sac.
Right, but it was also approved without causing the pavement or that culvert to go in at that point in time, so that it gave that flexibility. That's what I was told. That would happen before my time, but I was told that's why that street stopped short, because there was a question on whether they would ever actually want to take out the trees and put the culvert in and do that. And that's why the street, otherwise the pavement would go right up to the property line, and it does not. So that's what I was told was the reason that it stopped short was because it might not go through.
Yeah, that pavement's about, if I recall, like 50 feet probably. Well, put it this way, like you guys alluded to, that swale, or I don't like calling it gorge, but the swale.
The swale is fine.
It is significant in size. It's about 5-6 feet with a 5-foot bottom, so that's going to take up probably 30 or 40 feet. Not to mention there's probably some flat areas. So it is about 50, maybe more feet from it. Even Wolf Creek Drive falls, I think, about 20 or 30 feet short of the property line. But for the same reason, there was an existing swale there. They just didn't want to disturb everything, put the culvert in now.
But in that case, the idea was with Wolf Creek Drive, it would stop short, but that they would have to extend it when they developed the northeast parcel. So that's still the burden for that extension is still on Wolf Creek Town, or was, but now you guys are coming first, but.
Are there any commission members that would like to voice their opinion on this further? I guess I understand, Ron, what you're saying, and it would be a unique situation, but it's a very unique ravine in there. I mean, it would be tough to put a cul-de-sac. I don't think there's room between the homes and without
messing up the drainage right there.
It sounds like council has given approval to proceeding with it as is, and I guess I'd be okay with that, given that fact. I understand where you're coming from. That's certainly a very valid point. And I just didn't know any other commission members.
I don't see that little stub is any different than those other little stub streets off there. And to extend that street or do something there, that drainage swale there would be interrupted, and that has to be. And we do have the one connector street going through, which I think is important for law enforcement and fire protection and all those sorts of things too, and just the emergencies of we have disaster that have more than 2 ways to get out of there. So I guess I'm okay with this as it is.
Well, and I think just to be clear, based on, so we had a conversation at the rezoning. At that time, the conceptual drawing had the road going through. So from my perspective, whatever.
No, actually, the conceptual drawing was always this.
Was that?
Yeah.
Was that?
But they had given
one of the meetings that had the road going through. These guys saw it, reacted to it, and based on that reaction, said to define changing the drawing so it didn't go through. It wasn't without it. So your point is it can not go through, but come to an agreement on how to maintain that 150 foot or whatever it was.
How to not make it a city street,
Right.
not in compliance, so that next time a developer says they want to do one that way, they can't say, well, you've done these other ones as a permanent solution,
Right.
so why can't you do mine?
My point is the direction I think, at least maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but was to listen to the residents and don't require that road going through. It wasn't to not come up with an agreement for that 150 foot. Personally, if fire, police, and public works are okay with it, my concern goes down. I do appreciate your point. We have plans for a reason. We have ordinances for a reason. Do those other factors outweigh that? I'm not trying to. I'm just saying. I want to be very clear with. It wasn't the fact that there is an agreement, if you want to phrase it that way, didn't get blessing from me or anybody else. I don't think it was just a reaction to does the road go through or. I don't know if that helps.
I typically am right on board with you and agree we should extend the streets, connect them. This one's a little bit different to me, and mine's not really from the citizens' point of view, because who's going to live there next? You know, all those different reasons. I think the road was kind of left at an odd angle. I think there's a lot of infrastructure to put in across it, so I would say it's probably the one scenario where I'm okay with how it's drawn up, but I do appreciate the points, Rob.
Any other comments? Commission members? If not, would anyone want to make a motion regarding this?
Well, I will move that we approve preliminary plat, Creekview Estates, subject to the, review comments of the city engineer, the review comments and recommendations.
Second.
Any discussion? Not, could you call a vote?
Vogel,
Yes.
Cyrus,
Yes.
Jenkins,
No.
Triplett. No. Dietz,
Yes.
Olfest,
Yes.
Bowersox,
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. The last item is a motion to adjourn.
If I could have a point real quick.
Yes.
We didn't have on our agenda this time an update from the council or from the commission. If we could make sure that gets on the next agenda, I would like to give it, because it also wasn't on our last meeting, which was a special meeting, so I thought that's why it was missing. But I do want to give an update on our community visioning program at some point.
Sure. Okay. Good point. Thank you. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Yes. Oh, no, absolutely.